There are four words that I just hate hearing. I've heard them my entire adult life. They are just cars. And I agree, they are just cars. Life will go on with or without them. And lately, I've been adding too many cars. I bought an S65, which is a giant project. I'll get into that at some point. And I still have all of my other cars, and I bought something else to park in this garage. I have a problem. You guys know this already. Too many cars, and I have to get something out of here. And sadly, when I thought about all of the cars I do own and what I wanted to get rid of and what I wouldn't drive anymore, my 1980 626 was at the top of the list. I've had this car, oh man, I bought this car when I was engaged. I actually was at a tasting for our caterer that we didn't end up using, and I got a phone call from my friend Jeff saying, hey, there's this awesome 626. I had another one at the time that was very not awesome. This one's really nice, and you can just drive it and own it. And so I bought it. Here it is. And I've had it since 2000. Oh, it's been 10 years. I've had this car for 10 years. And I've put a staggering 440 miles on it. What am I doing? Cars are meant to be driven. And the truth is, I am scared to drive this car. Every time I take this car out, somebody almost hits me, or it's too slow to merge on the highway. I'm a nervous wreck driving this car. Not my Esprit, not the cars that are worth a bunch of money, but this is irreplaceable. I couldn't find another one like this if I tried. And so it doesn't really make much sense to keep it. It's not particularly great to drive. It's an 80s or late 70s import car. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. I love this car. But I've owned it for a decade, and I think I'd rather reserve this garage spot for something else I drive more. My dad is a retired Mazda master tech. He worked on these cars when they were brand new, and I remember sitting on the same brown carpet this 626 has, helping him bleed the clutch or the brakes on a car just like this. I think that's why I own this car, because it brings me back to when I was a kid, and I love the way this car looks. My favorite thing about it is sitting in it and just being around it and looking at it, because it's such a nice survivor. It's not rusty. It's a super straight car. I put the wheels on it. I still have the original wheels too. And 91,000 miles. It's a shame to let this thing sit in a garage and not see daylight. And that's probably why I'm ready to sell it. I don't want to sell it. If I had a big warehouse somewhere where I had a bunch of space, maybe I sold car parts. Okay, I can't keep this thing at work. I have to let go. I have too many cars and not enough garage spot, and I'm tired of seeing what I want to keep inside sit outside. So I'm going to sell it. Now, before I get a bunch of emails trying to buy this car, it's already sold. In fact, I've had a guy that's been hounding me for this for 5 or 6, maybe longer years. Every time he sees me, he's like, hey, are you ready to come off that 626 yet? Because I'm ready. And, well, I'm ready. I've had this car for 10 years. I have lots of memories with it that I'll never lose, hopefully. It's time to let go. So this is going to be hard to read, but this is my current car roster. There's a lot of cars on here, but there's a new addition. I bought a Carrera. I actually bought a Carrera from another YouTuber, and that really wasn't by design. I saw a pastel yellow 911 posted on one of the pages for those cars, and man, it checked all the boxes. It's an oddball color, it's a manual, and it wasn't expensive. So yeah, I added another Porsche. But unfortunately, good old eraser fingers, no more 626. I wasn't really in the market for a 911. This isn't a dream car of mine, but it did check a lot of boxes for me. It's an odd color. It's pastel yellow. It's an early car with a factory limited slip, and it has no other options outside of sunroof. But it's got an intelligent headlight car. Nothing fancy. I do love this body style. I wish, of course, it was a turbo car, but I'm not about to spend 996 turbo money on another car. It's just not going to happen. I'm usually the one that buys the cars that everyone shies away from. I'm not scared to fix anything on any of these cars, but I don't have infinite time, which is why I'm not really looking for more project cars. Don't talk about the S65. This isn't a project car. It doesn't need a complete rebuild. It doesn't need parts that aren't made anymore. It just needs a few small finishing touches. The guy I bought it from did a complete overhaul on this car. Engine and trans out, new clutch. He inspected the IMS. It's an early car anyways. Don't usually have to worry about that on these. This car is ready for a driver. It needs a few things, just a few small things. The shocks are original at nearly 160,000 miles, and the left rear is leaking, so I bought some Coney Yellows for it. And it has this god-awful pinstripe that I'm sure some of you have already picked up in the previous frame. That's got to go. So I'm going to do some paint work on it too. The paint on this spoiler... Thanks, dude. The paint on this spoiler... I think this is what they always do, and it doesn't really match the trunk or whatever you want to call this. The rear bumper and rear quarters don't match. It's been hit in the back lightly, so I'll have all that fixed. And then there's one other problem. There is one last thing I need to fix. The very first thing I'm going to do is right the wrongs of the past. And I understand that some people like pinstripes, and they do look good on some cars, but I don't know why you would chop the body lines of this car in half. So we're going to get these pinstripes off. Yeah, we're going to get these off. Now, I know you guys are going to say, why don't you have a Milwaukee heat gun? Well, the truth is, this is a Milwaukee heat gun. I have no idea how old this is, but I did find it in one of my parts cars. I was really hoping it would come off in one piece. I have no idea this is going to work on this. This paint is in such bad shape here. But we're going to try. Oh, it's not, clearly visible. It looks like this pinstripe might be original, which is surprising considering. Somehow, I keep buying cars that need a ton of work. That was the most appealing part of this car, is the fact that it didn't. It doesn't need a ton of work. It had a major service just completed, and I could just get in and drive it, change a few things about it, and that's it. Well, being in the industry I'm in has made me an incredibly harsh critic. I'm the last person you want to bring a car to if you want to buy it, because I will talk you out of it every single time. Now this car, I've been under it for the first time for about 5 minutes, and I found some things. Now, that doesn't mean it's a terrible car at all, and it doesn't mean that these issues are horrific. None of the problems I found with this car are terrible. They're just things that I'm going to have to address. I can't let it be. I just can't. Let's start at the front of the car. You always want to start at the front. Something is leaking up here, and I don't know if this is past or present, but there is definitely some oily substance on the driver's front part of this car. It's along the bottom of the fan shroud, and I don't know what up here can leak an oily substance. I know obviously it's got a radiator on both sides and the corners, but I don't know what else is up here that would leak. It's not leaving spots on the ground. This car's been in this spot for a couple days now, but it's definitely wet, so I'll have to address that. It's also missing the fasteners that hold the bumper to the body. That's not a huge deal. It's a super simple fix. All right, now the next part kind of drives me nuts. I am not a huge fan of worm clamps. I like factory clamps. In my experience, there's a reason they didn't use worm clamps, and it wasn't to piss off technicians. It was because they did a better job. And because there are worm clamps on these hoses, and the orientation of this clamp, it has actually rubbed through the coating on the body because of how it was installed. So at the very least, it's rotated in the wrong spot, and this hose doesn't really fit in the holder. And that could be because these are aftermarket hoses. Maybe they don't just fit right, or they're rotated or clocked incorrectly. Either way, all really simple to fix. Really simple. Same kind of deal on this side. Some minor adjustments, and everything will fit correctly. Another small thing is that the grommets on the wheel speed sensor line are missing. I think these deteriorate with age, and then this thing kind of just flops around all wet noodly like. I don't know if I really feel like replacing a wheel speed sensor to get those, or maybe I'll make them out of something else. But that needs to be secured. The next thing we're going to do is remove this shield. I don't like just looking at things without touching them. We got to get this all apart. So we're going to remove these two 10 millimeters and then the factory supplied zip ties. Those aren't factory. I'm kidding. I wonder what lies behind this. Oh, I gotta remove the rest of this to find out. Well, that side's in there. For some reason, this doesn't want to line up, and that retaining bracket is slightly broken. Cool. Well, this is probably the most alarming part of all of it. Why is there a zip tie here? It looks like this clip is bent. And there's another zip tie here. It looks like something's missing. This one has something else that goes inside the clip, unless they use two different styles. This is the shifter cables on the side of the transmission. And this doesn't really enjoy going into third gear that much. It doesn't grind. It doesn't feel right. Kind of like the shifter cables are in a bind, but they don't look like they're in a bind to me. And it would take a lot to rotate one of these ends 360 degrees. That just doesn't make any sense. So it could just be some bushing issues. There could be some moisture inside of one of the sheathing here, causing some rust. That's a future problem. We can snap this back into here. Perfect. Looks like the grommets are deteriorated in the back too. I really don't want to put all 4 wheel speed sensors on this, so I'll have to find a solution for that. Now this thing just had an engine out service. It had the heads off. The entire cooling system was replaced. So this thing looks really good. Everything's clean and relatively dry. I don't think he went crazy and cleaned everything while it was out. That's like something that techs don't do because they don't get paid to. But I do it. I also don't get paid for it. But I don't see anything wrong here. This looks really good. I didn't really expect to find anything here. This car does throw a lean code on occasion, and that is something that I will likely try to figure out later. Oh, that's not right. That wouldn't go there. I'll look at that in a minute. But yes, tons of new parts. It's been resealed. So no major leaks. Could just use a nice detail under here. That's about it. I have to laugh here. There's a BMW hose clamp on that coolant pipe. It's also not really installed all the way. We'll have to see how that gets fixed. But I definitely got to get that hose clamp off of there. I don't want this thing to start leaking power steering fluid. Now let's get a wheel off, take a look at what it's going to take to put shocks on this car. Yep. So the main reason I wanted to put shocks on this is because this left rear is leaking, and it has been for some time. It's not just a little damp, it's also not creating a pool underneath it. The first thing I'm actually going to do is reinstall the coil heat shields. These are pretty simple to reinstall. I had to raid some bolt bins. I got some Toyota bolts going in here, as I want this car to be a little bit more reliable. Certainly don't want to put any BMW bolts in here. Unfortunately, in order to reinstall this muffler bracket, I have to unbolt the exhaust manifold. So we're going to get that unbolted. We'll see how much clearance we get. I might have to drop the entire exhaust system to get that bracket back in. Oh, well, apparently that was all that was holding it up. Probably not supposed to be that way. Well, obviously. Now, can we snake this in here? Oh, it's close, but I think I'm going to have to remove the rest of the exhaust. Hopefully this doesn't just like fall. It could. Oh, I see what was going on here. This has a few different positions it can fit in. But that's how she goes. Let's get some bolts. All right, let's get this exhaust manifold bolted back in. All right, now these have a torque spec. It's 18 foot-pounds, so we're going to get this torque down. This one's a little challenging because of the hose clamp placement. We'll get it though. I'll go ahead and get this muffler bypass out of the way. All right, now let's see if we can get this bracket in place. Is pretty in place. Time to torque down the exhaust manifold. All right, now we can hang the mufflers. Little finagling here. The exhaust is back on. Now we get to hear what it sounds like without these. Okay, let's see what it sounds like. It's gotta be better. Well, I got this thing running, I was poking around, I can hear a vacuum leak. So I started messing around and found that it's leaking this here.
I don't know why. Oh, it's got a hole in it right there. Well, that'll cause a lean code. Sweet. So, where does the other end of this go? Is this for the brake booster? I think that's for the brake booster. Oh, since I can't really drive with my thumb on it. Oh, and there's a coolant hose with some belt wear on it. What's going on in here? When I bought this car, I was told it threw a lean code after some time. And yeah, there's a tiny little hole right there. That's hissing pretty good. And then if you look here, that hose, that needs to be replaced. And then if you look here, that's missing. Yeah, I don't buy projects. This wasn't, oh look, that clamp isn't even on here. Ah, cool. Well, at least this is all easy stuff, I think. But wait, there's more! So take a look at the gasket hanging out between the upper plenum and the lower intake manifold. Now, these intake gaskets do have a locating pin that does protrude when the intake manifold is installed, or at least it appears to in the pictures of it. However, this is way too much gasket to be hanging out. This is installed incorrectly, or there's something wrong with it. Either way, to repair this, I'm going to have to pull the engine out. Yay. First thing we're going to do is disconnect the sway bar from the bottom of the shock base. Now it's time to get the shocks out, and we're going to start by removing the sway bar from the shock base. That's good. And we're out. So for shocks, I bought Coney Yellows. They're kind of my shock of choice for cars like this. As you can see, this one is pretty wet. That's the worst one. It drove okay, but I didn't want to take any chances. So just go ahead and replace the shocks, especially at 160,000 miles. So now we got to get this apart. And normally I would put this on the ground, put my foot behind the strut mount, and then zip this with an impact and just fire the shock somewhere on my driveway. But I got a camera out, so I can't really do that. So we're going to do this the right way. And I've got this spring compressor, which I think will work for what we're doing here. Normally you do this in a vise, but we don't need a vise. We're just going to kind of get this on there, and it'll work just fine. Okay, now we're on there. So now I just got to crank this down. This squeezes it together. We can undo the top shock nut without firing anything across my driveway, and we can replace the shock. As you can see, that one's been leaking. It's wet right there at the top. Now we can get this. Okay. Now we can undo this, and the spring should go right into place. All right, now we're ready to go back in. So that's got to go there, and I got to get this suspension down so I can slide the bottom of the shock. Well, I've got the spring and shock assembly reinstalled, and now I have to tighten up all the control arm bolts that I loosened. I had to loosen up 3 control arm bolts so that I could pull this hub down far enough to get the shock back installed. And I need to put some load on this corner before I tighten everything back up to simulate the car sitting on the ground. So we're going to use my pole jack to do so. We're just going to put some force on it, and then we got to make sure everything's lined up, and we can crank those bolts down. If you don't do this, it can really increase the rate in which the control arm bushings wear out, and you're also effectively changing the spring rate because now you've got the torsion of the rubber bushings. I think we're about good right there. Well, the back's all done. Now it's time to start on the front. We went back to front. You should not do that. It's dirty, but it's fine. It just needs a really good detail. It's got good brakes. And the front shocks and springs don't look like they're going to be that difficult. All right, now it's time to loosen this part of the control arm. Now we'll take the big pinch bolt out. Now we can unbolt the top bolts. The pinch bolt is actually the sway bar end link. After looking at this a little closer, I realized that the bump stop has disintegrated. It's like this gooey stuff that hopefully doesn't end up on my concrete and get stuck there. It's just all gone. So we're going to take this apart, and I'm going to see if I can come up with a solution for this. Oh, the shaft is spinning. This isn't dangerous at all. That's it? Really? All that? So now we have to figure out what to do for a bump stop. I have an idea. I like my dust boot there. Well, this shock is done. Here's the new one. And it just so happens that I had an extra set of KW coilover, which are made with Coney shocks. And they just fit perfect. Boop. Done. Sometimes it works out that way. Not always. Will this travel down and hit the shock? It does. So I'm going to have to trim. I'm going to trim this collar off. And that won't be a big deal at all. Alright, so I've got my bump stops trimmed down, and that'll slide right on the shaft like so. I'll put that on like so. Actually fits pretty good. And then we gotta reassemble the rest of this. I think we can do this. Oh yeah. No compressor needed. Oh, this should slide right in. Careful on that fender. Looks like the Coney sticker is kind of a problem. I'm gonna have to peel the Coney sticker off. That's it's pretty interesting. Guys, your sticker placement not the best. Okay, put it on the away. Put that on the away. There we go. Now we're in the right spot here. Oh yeah. Pick this up. Trying to get it lined up. Okay. Now, those are in. Now I got to tighten everything back up. Before I put this wheel back on, I need to fix this. So this is the clamp. It's actually keeping this from going all the way up against the body where it's supposed to. So we're going to loosen that clamp and rotate it, and then figure out why this isn't fitting in here. Nothing seems to fit right for whatever reason. So let's try to straighten that out. Well, that is probably the worst thing I've seen so far. It has green coolant in it. That is a big no-no for these cars. European cars typically don't take green coolant, especially these. Well, I guess we're going to drain all the coolant out of it, and then we're going to have to flush it. Why? Why does this have green coolant in it? Why would you ever do this? This is going to make a huge mess. I know it. But I need to drain it. I don't have enough drain pans in this place. Oh, we're spraying everywhere. And me. I just took a coolant bath in the wrong color coolant to fix a problem that should not have existed because it had the wrong clamps on it. And it likely had the wrong clamps on it because it has the cheap, crappy hoses on that don't fit well. Try not to be mad. I just wanted to put shocks and mufflers on it. Sorry, got a little in my mouth. That's it. Just a few things, and then I can drive it. But now, after what I've seen so far, which this ball has really gotten a lot of momentum, and I don't like it, I'm probably gonna have to pull the engine and transmission out of this car. I bought this car so I could just do a couple things and drive it. That's it. If I had known this was a giant project, I never would have considered it. All to save some money, maybe? I don't really know why. Why? There's no benefit here. I'm a little upset. I spend my working hours solving problems and thinking of ways to more effectively and efficiently take cars apart and sell those parts. Working on cars to put them back together, it's not what I do for a living, but it is very therapeutic for me. I love doing it. But maybe I should stop buying project cars. I have a few too many, and that is actually why this car was so appealing, because it just had an engine out service, it had a bunch of new parts, it was only supposed to need a few small little things fixed. And here we are. I have to drain the entire cooling system, get all of the wrong green coolant out of it, and replace it with the right stuff. I'm going to replace all of the worm clamps I can get to. All of the rubber hoses that don't fit well are going to get replaced. And then I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that the intake manifold gasket that looks like it's rolled out of the plenum doesn't leak. Because if that does leak, I have to pull the engine out. And I don't really have the time for that, because I've entered this car in a car show. Actually, I'm bringing 5 cars to the St. Louis European Auto Show. It's June 5th. If you want to Google where it's at, it's really simple to find. And I'm going to bring my Lotus Esprit, my E34 wagon, my E46 M3 is going. This car better be there. I really have a lot of work to do. And maybe one other car. I don't know what I'm going to drive. Anyway, this was not supposed to be a multi-video series at all. It's supposed to be one video. Hey guys, I bought this rare colored 911. I sold this car I never drove, even though I love it dearly. And that was it. And the end of this video was supposed to be me ripping the back roads and having my GoPro on the back quarter. But instead, it's beached on my rack with a bunch of parts on order. Hopefully I can get this done in time. I really hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I can handle all of it now. Just give it to me. Anyway, I'll catch you on the next one.